Late last month, the Madagascan youth began large-scale protests in the capital over their lack of basic necessities such as electricity and water. The protests gradually grew and started spreading to other cities, which prompted the government to respond. On the 30th of September, the now former president of Madagascar, Mr. Rajolina, dissolved his government in a bid to appease the angry protesters. However, the demands widened and protesters started calling for the president's resignation, citing corruption, unemployment, and poor services. The president then appoints a military general as his prime minister. He dissolved his government to appease those youth protesters, right? Like telling them, yeah, come on, like I dissolved my government. If there's anything to discuss, like, come on, you guys, like, calm down, right? But things didn't calm down. And he tried the next thing. He went to the next step and appointed this military general as his prime minister. He was sensing some movements in the military. He was a bit worried that something might happen. Something was cooking in the military, right? So the suspicious movements, and the guy was like, okay, I need to just contain this and let me appoint this like military general as my prime minister in order to secure my back and prevent a military coup or something. However, that doesn't work too. He also tries to call for the youth and the civic leaders of the protests who are leading the protest for national dialogue. But since this movement is this new Gen Z youth-led protests are very decentralized, there's no one person or even like a group or a council to talk to. They only know what they want and they just go on until they achieve that. So it's very easy to engage them. The only way to quell them or like to make them stop is to give them what they want. If they call for your resignation, just resign, my nigga. Like there's no way to deal with it, right? So the guy was desperate and he felt like maybe he could play some tricks and bring the protests to a halt. But as you might have guessed, that ends up not working, and the political crisis only deepens. He then attempts to dissolve the lower house of the parliament after hearing that opposition lawmakers were meeting to begin impeachment proceedings against him. He basically calls it a conspiracy against him and that there's some attempted coup against him led by this elite army unit that sided with the youth protest, by the way. They sided with the youth and they called on the security forces who were shooting at the youths who were protesting when the protests began. They were shooting at the youth, by the way, peaceful protesters, and they killed around like, well, more than 20, I believe, of the protesters. So this elite army unit called on those forces to stop targeting those youth and allow the protests to continue. Now, make sure to remember this elite army unit because they'll have a big role in the story later on. After his failed attempt, the president or the former president's failed attempts to dissolve the parliament, he flees the country. Some people say he fled to Mauritius. Some people say he fled to France. Personally, I think it's more likely that he fled to France. Like, it doesn't make sense that he fled to another neighboring African country. Like, it makes more sense that he flees to the country that he was beholden to. The same way the dictator in Bangladesh went to India because she was a puppet or like she was an ally of the Indian regime, right? So the elite army unit that we had just mentioned earlier seizes control of the country's armed forces and state television. A top court in the Madagascar then declares the presidency vacant and names the leader of the elite army unit, Colonel Michael Randrianirina, the interim leader. They appointed this guy the leader of the elite army unit, the new leader or president of the country. Now, there are conflicting reports about the length of the transition period. The court says he has to hold elections within 60 days after his takeover, but the military commander says he'll lead the country for a two-year transitional period. Now that's concerning. Like, who has the say here? So what happened next is that the African Union then suspends Madagascar's membership after the coup, calling for a rapid return to an inclusive and civilian-led transition and elections. Talks are currently ongoing between a high-level African Union delegation and the new Madagascan rulers or elites or administration. So to give my personal opinion, I'm not sure. I don't know like what to feel because I have to tell you guys, the ones who are so excited, I don't quite understand why or what you're so excited about. most of the dictators in Africa today came through coups. The ones that you're complaining about, I'm not going to mention names or countries, of course, but like literally almost every African dictator that you guys are complaining about, especially Africans, they probably came through a coup. These guys who refuse like to let go of that seat. Some of them are in that seat for 20 years, some of them 30 years, some even 40 years. Imagine that. They came through a coup. So not everyone who does a coup is like some, I appreciate like people want that change, right? They're desperate. Any new leader seems like a breath of fresh air for them. But you should be careful nonetheless. Like not every change is good. I just want to say that. I don't want to spoil the fan, or and I'm not talking about Madagascans here by the way. Maybe Madagascans know this guy. Maybe he's actually some guy with a good reputation and he's an honest person. I don't know. I don't know. But military people usually like there's a high probability of him just turning into a new dictator. I just hope you guys understand that. Secondly, coups, they're like a Pandora's box. You don't really know what you're gonna get. Sometimes you might get a good person, sometimes you might get a bad person. The only person who knows the intentions of that guy who did the coup and took over the country is that guy himself. Maybe his associates, the people he's planning the things with. But apart from that, nobody really knows like what he's about, his beliefs, what he wants. Sometimes you might get a really nasty dictator. It happens in many places, by the way. My point is sometimes you might just get even worse dictators, right? But sometimes you might strike gold, or maybe not. For some people, they don't like even good, quote unquote, good dictators. But sometimes you might get one of those really patriotic, quote unquote, dictators. These guys are very repressive. Don't get me wrong, they're very repressive. They don't allow any dissent. Even on election days, they're the sort of people who win by 90% or something. Like, come on, my nigga. Nobody wins with a 90%. Nobody wins 90% of the votes. Like, it doesn't happen. Even if you are so loved by your people, you're probably gonna get like 60 something percent. If like you really, really loved, you're gonna get like at most the limit is like 75%. Anything more than that is probably rigged. Nobody like casually gets, especially if you're like long-term guy, people get tired of you. So getting continuously, like some of these niggas just casually get 90% of the votes in their sixth term. And the country is just going to shit and growth into hell. And you wonder, who are you trying to lie to? Like, the whole election thing is just a ceremony to them. It's just like for them to re-elect themselves. But anyway, my point is like, there's this other breed of quote unquote dictators who are really like patriotic and they're not beholden to any foreign countries. They're really patriotic. They bring developments to their countries. They improve the situation of their people, right? Some people would argue that that's what's happening in the Sahel, especially in Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traore, I believe his name is. He cracks down on dissent. Like there's no opposition parties, I believe, but it seems patriotic. And this type of quote unquote dictators, by the way, even like when they get overthrown, people get surprised that they have nothing under their name. Most of them just die. While they used to get some normal salaries, they don't have no offshore accounts, having billions of like stolen funds from their countries. So you wonder like, why are they so oppressive then? Could be a personality thing. Maybe they thought they were generally doing like that's what their country needed. Maybe it's just I don't know, it's just hard to explain, but they are generally patriotic. They're not one of those like who are very repressive and they just stay on for like 40 years and then suck their countries dry, basically. There are these guys who have mansions in Europe, in Monaco, like their kids live like kings, basically. And their country just is rotting in poverty.